Alive and Well STL is a presentation of the St. Louis Regional Health Commission and Rare Gem Productions to build a healthier St. Louis. Power up with the positive. Learn more at oneraregem.com. That's ONERAREGEM.com.
Support for Alive and Well STL comes from Beyond Housing, helps entire communities become better places to live. Learn more at beyondhousing.org.
The Regional Health Commission works in partnership with regional health sector advocates and stakeholders to improve healthcare access, reduce health disparities, and improve health outcomes for the uninsured and the underinsured in St. Louis City and County.
Alive and Well STL with Bethany Johnson-Javois, CEO of the St. Louis Integrated Health Network and Managing Director of the Ferguson Commission. On today's show, we share with you our celebration, our honor and privilege to sit at the feet of our elders. Part 2 with civil rights attorney Frankie Muse Freeman.
I was born in Danville, Virginia, the last capital of the Confederacy, which everything was segregated. Of course, the racial segregation was actually the law in 17 states. I wanted to be a lawyer. I said I was going to be a lawyer, but actually, I did not actually make the final decision to be a lawyer until 1944, although I talked about it. And I think we have to recognize that a lot of times we talk about things we're going to do, we're fixing to do, but we don't yet do. I went to New York because I had decided that I was going to go to law school.
This is producer Jade Harrell. We'll be right back. Alive and Well, STL. Washington Tabernacle Missionary Baptist Church welcomed Sister Mary Antona Ebo, Catholic nun and civil rights activist, as well as Frankie Muse Freeman Esquire, civil rights attorney, with facilitators Bethany Johnson-Javois and Ronald Jackson. Facilitator Ronald Jackson, chairperson of the executive committee of the St. Louis Black Leadership Roundtable, welcomes Frankie Muse Freeman Esquire.
Thank you. I am very delighted to be here this evening because I've had an opportunity to work with both Sister Ebo and Frankie Freeman over a period of time. And to be here, to be able to listen to their stories is powerful, because in traditional cultures, the griot is the person who has the wisdom and passes the wisdom on to the younger people. And we need to cherish that tradition of passing on of wisdom in modern society. Frankie Freeman, about 20 years ago, I became the executive director of the National Conference of Christians and Jews. And Frankie Freeman was on the board, and she became the president of the board when I was there. And thank goodness for Frankie being president of the board, because she helped me out a whole lot in doing some really important work. Civil rights lawyer Frankie Muse Freeman was born Marie Frankie Muse on November 24th, 1916 in Danville, Kentucky. Her parents, Danville, Virginia. See, she's on it. Her parents, Maud Beatrice Smith Muse and William Brown Muse, came from college-educated families. Her relatives included Charles Sumner Muse, Edward Muse, and Clarence Muse. Frankie grew up in Danville, where she attended Westmoreland School and learned to play the piano. At age 16, Frankie enrolled in her mother's alma mater, Hampton Institute, which she attended between 1933 and 1936. While in New York, Freeman met and married Shelby T. Freeman. In 1944, she was admitted to Howard University Law School, where William H. Hasty and Spotsfield Robertson were on the faculty. Those were distinguished law professors. Freeman graduated second in her class in 1947. Upon graduating from law school, Frankie set up her own law offices in the Jefferson Bank building in June of 1949 and became engaged in the civil rights movement. Frankie was part of an NAACP legal brain trust, which included Sidney Redmond, Robert Witherspoon, and Henry Espy in the NAACP's 1949 Bruton versus the Board of Education of St. Louis, following the case to victory in the Supreme Court of the state of Missouri. In 1954, the same year as Brown versus the Board of Education, Freeman was the lead attorney for the landmark NAACP case Davis et al. Versus the St. Louis Housing Authority, which ended legal racial discrimination in public housing in St. Louis. In 1955, Freeman became the first Associate General Counsel of the St. Louis Housing Authority and Land Clearance Authority. In 1958, she became a charter member of the Missouri Advisory Committee to the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights. Frankie provided NAACP counsel to core activists demonstrating against hiring discrimination policies at Jefferson Bank. In March 1964, she was appointed by President Lyndon Johnson as the first female member of the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights. Freeman served as a commissioner for 16 years and later as Inspector General of the Community Service Administration during the Carter administration. Freeman was also a municipal court judge in the early 1970s. In 1982, she helped form a bipartisan Citizens Commission on Civil Rights to monitor the federal government's enforcement of laws barring discrimination. Frankie is a trustee emeritus of the Board of Trustees of Howard University, past chairman of the Board of Directors of the National Council on Aging, the Urban League of Metropolitan St. Louis. She is also a member of the Board of the United Way, Metropolitan Zoological Park and Museum District, and many other civic organizations in St. Louis. And just recently, Frankie was appointed by President Barack Obama to the President's Commission on Presidential Scholars. And she just told me this evening she's been working hard on that. Frankie Muse Freeman. Okay, next question is, what made you want to be a lawyer in the 1930s and 1940s when there were very few female lawyers? What motivated you to want to do that at that time, Frankie?
What motivated me was I was born in Danville, Virginia, the last capital of the Confederacy, which everything was segregated. Of course, the racial segregation was actually the law in 17 states. And so I wanted to be a lawyer. I said I was going to be a lawyer, but actually I did not actually make the final decision to be a lawyer until 1944, although I talked about it. And I think we have to recognize that a lot of times we talk about things we're going to do, we're fixing to do, we don't yet do. And I had, when I went to New York after 3 years at Hampton, I went to New York because I had decided that I was going to go to law school. And I filed an application with St. John's University in Brooklyn and received and was approved. But after I'd been there a week, I was told that they did not accept Hampton. Well, actually, I think 2 or 3 years later, somebody told me that actually it was not because they didn't accept Hampton's credits, but actually they didn't recognize that when I filed my application, Frankie Muse, that I was not, they did not accept women at law school, and of course that didn't happen for several years afterwards. But I did not know that, but I just knew that I was not, that at least they did not accept me. So I was living with my aunt, and I just took some miscellaneous things, and that's when I met Shelby, who had also come to Washington, who had come to New York from St. Louis, from Lincoln University, because in Missouri, the law was the same. He graduated from Lincoln. He wanted graduate school at the University of Missouri. But what happened, what Missouri did was pay his way to go to graduate school. He chose New York. And that's how I met him. So as I said, I was absolutely opposed to racial segregation, but as a result of it, I at least met my husband, because I would not have come to New York, come to St. Louis. But so there are certain things that, not that I'll ever approve segregation, but actually I met Shelby That was the love of my life. He died after 52 years of marriage. He died in 1991. But anyway, what did you ask me?
What made you going to become a lawyer? You answered it.
Oh, did I answer you?
Yeah, you answered
Okay.
it. Good.
When I first came, my husband, was in St. Louis, and so that's how I happened to be in St. Louis. And when I graduated from Howard Law School, my several of the friends, Thurgood Marshall had offered me a job which I did not accept because we were coming back to St. Louis. But there were people who wrote to some of the law firms here recommending me to come to work for them, work with them, or for them. And because they recommended me because I had ranked second in my class. And when I came here, I was hoping that probably I would already be able to work with some of the firms, but nobody answered. The white firms did not answer. The black firms, there were a couple of who said I could help to do the typing. Well, I had become a lawyer because from the beginning I was going to be a trial lawyer. And so what I did was I opened my own office in 1949 as a sole practitioner. But Dave Grant took me down and introduced me to the judges. And then what I knew that I had to do was I told the judges that I would be willing to accept cases pro bono while I was trying to build up a law practice. And at my office, I did open an office, which was well equipped because I knew what offices should look like. And somebody came into my office and looked for a lawyer, and I told him I was a lawyer. He said, "I don't want a woman." So that, of course, but that didn't stop me. Somebody else came in, and I started. But then I also made it very possible, let the NASP know that I was available to work on any cases that they had or any problems that they had. And that's how I got started with the NAACP.
This is the 50th anniversary of your being with the Civil Rights Commission and of Selma that Sister Ebo attended 50 years ago. And when Frankie came in, she showed me a book, and it's called Racial Isolation in Public Schools. And it is March 1967. So given your work on the Civil Rights Commission and kind of looking at where we've come, working with the Voluntary Transfer Program, Commission, where do you see, given all that experience, where are we and how has the past influenced the now from your perspective?
I want to at least talk about what it was like when I was first appointed as a commissioner of the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights. I had been active in civil rights, and I was also a member of the Democratic Party, although this is, I know, nonpartisan, but I was a Democrat, still am. And so that's when I was active. That's how I happened to be appointed, or being considered as a commissioner of the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights, because President Kennedy, when he was campaigning, had said that when he was elected, he was going to appoint more women to positions, to responsible positions in the government. And on November the 17th of 1963, I had been invited to the White House, and I was being told that I was going to be being considered for the Civil Rights Commission. And it was an honor. I had a discussion about that. but 1 week later was the assassination, and I thought it was over. But in February, President Johnson did nominate me, and I was later confirmed as the commissioner of the Civil Rights Commission. During all of this time, during the 1957s, 58, 60, 61s, there was, as I said, the continuing racial discrimination, and especially one of the issues, big issues, was the denial of the right to vote. And there were protests that were gathering around. And so when I became a commissioner, one of the issues that the Civil Rights Commission was concerning was the fact that in Mississippi, there were not only were people many people, African Americans, being denied the right to vote, but there was violence. There were all kinds of things that were happening to them, and so those reports had been made to the commission, and in the meantime, there were, of course, freedom rides. There were protests that were going on. And of course, all of that was something that the commission, we considered. And one of the reasons that I'm bringing it up, because although the protests were going on, and they were going on because not only of the brutality that people who tried to vote, but the fact that there were people who were being denied many other equal opportunities. So the thing that happened was that the commission decided that it would be holding hearings in those states, and at that time, the things that were happening, they were still, this was 1963, there were actually, Martin Luther King even was at least saying, if you protest, but at least let it be nonviolent, and it was. But so the protests brought to the attention the things that needed to be changed, because there was a lot of denial of not only the Voting Rights Act, but there was any denial of opportunity, of equal opportunity throughout. So the commission decided to hold a hearing. Well, they had been in existence since 1958. They had held some hearings, but when I became a commissioner in 1964, after that we decided to hold a hearing in Jackson, Mississippi in February of 1965. You may remember or may have read about the three Northerners, people who came from New York and around, who had come to Mississippi to help solve the problem. And there were murders and there were things that were going on. So all of this happened, and the Civil Rights Commission, we were in Mississippi for hearings, and we were there. For about 10 days. We had hearings in two phases, one directed directly at the Voting Rights Act, and the other based on justice. So our hearings we subpoenaed 30 witnesses. They were widely televised, and the truth, and the people, some of the witnesses brought to us things that they had tried to register to vote 3 or 4 times, and one of the requirements of the registrar was that they would have to read and interpret the Mississippi Constitution to the satisfaction of the registrar. And several of them had done this, but they had still been denied the right to vote. So when we went to Mississippi in February of 1965, one of the things that had happened before then, there were 4 black churches in Canton, Mississippi, that had been they had burned because they held opportunities, they had plans, and they were encouraging people to vote. And so I wanted to at least see if I was going to go to Mississippi for Jackson, Mississippi's hearing. We all went the day ahead of time, and I wanted to go and see where anybody would burn black churches. Well, they said, and I told them when I got there that I wanted a car to take me there. And they said, oh, you can't do that. Well, I said, well, they said, we can't take you there. And so then I said, well, if you can't take me there, get me a car and I'll drive there. Well, the next morning, they called me and told me, Mrs. Freeman, will you have your car? The commissioner, Dean Griswold of Harvard, he's going. His wife who's with him, she's going. So it ended up there were several of us who went. And that, of course, was one of the things that from then on, we always went and checked out the area before the hearing started. So also what we did, when the witnesses came, we asked Dean Griswold, when it came to his time to ask the questions, asked the witness told about the fact that she had been denied because of the not being able to read and interpret the Constitution to the satisfaction. When the registrar had been subpoenaed by us, Dean Griswold asked him to read that same provision and interpret it. And he looked at it, and he looked at it, and he could not interpret the provision of the Constitution that he had asked the witness to interpret. Those were the kinds that was the kind of testimony that for the next 5 days we received. And at our hearing, because of that had been very clear that even in several counties in Mississippi, there were 2 counties with a majority black population, and not one was registered to vote. So on that basis, and on the basis of the fact that there were protests throughout this country during that period, then what we did was submit recommendations to the president and to the Congress. And 3 of the recommendations that we submitted to the Congress became the Voting Rights Act, which was signed by President Johnson in 1965.
Alive and Well celebrates our history, embraces our present, and is hopeful for the bright future. Made on behalf of these phenomenal women committed to make a difference for all of us. You can listen to this program in its entirety by visiting aliveandwellstl.com. Alive and Well STL.
We are grateful for your gift of time to this conversation. We encourage you to stay involved and get involved.
If you, your family, or your organization is interested in talking about how we better the well-being of the region, sign up for more information, join the conversation, log on to aliveandwellstl.com, and let's build a plan on how we can work together and improve our overall health and become alive and well. The Regional Health Commission with Chief Executive Officer Robert Friend Jr. committed to providing a detailed review of change over the past decade and 14 leading health indicators for the city and county of St. Louis. The first decade review of health status report, an update to building a healthier St. Louis. Discover the narrative, the data, and celebrate the progress already made to improve healthcare access and reduce health disparities in our region. Learn more at stlrhc.org. Alive and Well STL is another positive production of Rare Gem Productions.